Good morning, everybody. We're going to be doing some chili cooking today, and one of the first things I want to tell you about is that you need to have something going on in the background that makes you happy. For me, it's music, a song that I really like. When you're cooking, how you're feeling comes through in your food. So if you have some good music going on in the background or a good TV show or something, and it makes you happy, your cooking will reflect that. So I do apologize for the mess of my kitchen. Now, supposedly in the competition chili world, there is a superstition that once you win with your stove, you never wash it. You let it get dirty and grimy and whatnot. I think that's terribly disgusting personally, but maybe it's just my sanitation training stuck in my head, but I wouldn't want to serve stuff to people from a stove that is all gross and disgusting, and it just... Ugh. Anyway, this is my cooking vessel for today. This is my 6-quart Dutch oven. We're going to be filling this with really good chili today. Like I said, we're making TMI chili today, and today we're going to be taking you through the step-by-step process. I love a Dutch oven, and we're going to cook as much as we can fit in this pot. So what the heck am I doing here? You can see that I've got ground beef in a strainer with water running on it. Why? Why would I do that? Well, I'll tell you. A lot of people think this is a silly step when they first see it, but I've learned from the competition chili world is that it's a good idea to rinse your meat, sometimes both before and after cooking. Different schools of thought there, but it helps get some of the extra grease and the extra blood out. I rinse it, cook it, and when you're cooking it, you want to gray it. I do put salt in it, and then after I cook it, I drain it again, and I rinse it again, and that gets it nice and clean and ready to accept the flavoring the ingredients put in, and it makes your broth really smooth because you don't have blood or grease from the meat floating on the top. Instead, you just have a really flavorful sauce. Emphasis again, when we put this in the skillet, we're going to be graying the meat. We're not going to be browning it all the way through. We're just going to get it to give it a little bit of color. We're not going to sear it. We want to just make sure that it has a little bit of color, but it doesn't try to seal it in as much as it does. Not that searing seals it, but believe it or not, graying works better than browning, and it just produces a better flavored meat. The flavors permeate it better, and it just seems to work. So supposedly, you're not supposed to show brand names in commercial videos and stuff that's on TV, but since this isn't on TV, we're going to talk about brands of kosher salt, or salt in general. This is Diamond Crystal Kosher Salt, and I'm going to talk about salt for a moment. Let's look at the ingredients list. See that? Salt. Let's look at another brand of kosher salt, and I'll show you here on the ingredient list why it's so important. If you look closely here as we zoom in, you'll see that this has this anti-caking agent, this yellow prussiate of soda. Supposedly it's a good thing, and it may be, but I've not found that kosher salt cakes that much, with or without it. The Diamond Kosher Salt has been grainy and loose, and it's been wonderful to work with. And we live in Chicago. It does get humid in here. I don't have air conditioning in the kitchen, so, I don't really notice a difference. So I don't use, in my really good dishes, I don't use the Morton salt that we're looking at, which is really only called kosher salt because of the grain. I don't know how yellow prussiate of soda is pronounced properly, but I can taste the difference between this salt and the Diamond Crystal salt. It just tastes different. It's like having iodized salt versus kosher salt. I presume that since salt makes other things taste like themselves, salt makes salt taste like salt. If you use a salt that has additives, it's going to make your food taste like the additives, even though it may have some, flavor-enhancing properties. Now this salt, one of my spice buddies sent me this. This is called Real Salt, and it's actually sea salt. When we turn to the ingredients, it's going to show you that it is really just pure sea salt. Now granted, there are trace minerals in it because it is a sea salt and it is evaporated, and it's not a salt that you get from like a salt mine in the center of the earth where you actually dig out salt deposits. It's sea salt, but it is good. But really my favorite, I have to say, is the kosher salt that is pure salt versus the kosher salt that has the anti-caking agent. And every now and then, if I'm feeling extra gourmet, just because I like it, I will use the real sea salt, because sometimes sea salt just has a little bit of a flavor that you don't get from either of the other salts. And again, I don't keep iodized salt. I'm not going to get a goiter. I'm not worried about that. My health is good. I get iodine from other natural food sources, and it doesn't harm me any that I use this stuff. So that's it on salt. Alright, I know this looks funny, but I've rinsed it and squeezed the meat out, and there's still a lot of water in there, and I've got salt on it, so it's actually sucking the rest of the water out. Again, don't worry about over-salting. Water or not, the salt is just going to make the meat taste more like meat. What we're going to do when this is done, we're going to be draining it, and we're going to be straining it, and we're going to put it in the Dutch oven, and it'll really take on the flavor of the seasonings that we add. Alright, so the beef that I'm using is an 80-20 ratio lean to fat ground beef from the grocery store. I'm not worried about the fact that I'm not grinding my own meat here. I do sometimes, and I would for a competition, but I'm not going to today. And I like the 80-20 balance because there's just enough fat there to give it flavor when it renders down, but it doesn't overpower the meat and make it taste greasy or slimy or whatever. And since we're rinsing it, after we're done, it's going to wash away any of that excess stuff that could collect and pool at the top. When you're cooking chili or anything else, stay cool and stay hydrated. I've got some water here. I'm going to have some Powerade here in just a moment. And I'm going to make sure that I eat, because you have to have some nutrition. I'm going to make a patty melt for lunch, and that will get me my protein. That will give me the energy to continue. And with the refreshment, I'll feel good, and that'll make my chili feel good. So here's our 3.5, actually closer to 4 pounds, 4.5 pounds actually, of ground beef. It has been grayed, and it's in little bitty chunks. We're going to go ahead and add the broth to cover it up so it doesn't get dry. And I've got a chicken and a beef broth today. I'll go into a little bit more about that a little bit later as far as why I use what. But once we've got those in and get those flavors cooking into the meat, we'll start adding seasonings, and we'll be in the Dutch oven from now on. One thing about chili cooking, when you're cooking on a gas stove, whether it be the stove at your home or it be a camping stove, unless it's a professional grade stove that has a really wide burner, you're going to need one of these. This is a heat diffuser, and it takes the flame from the center of a stove, like you see here, and actually just helps that flame to spread out farther across the cooking vessel that you're using. Believe it or not, just using a pan that has that heating plate on the bottom doesn't mean that it's going to cook evenly, even in a Dutch oven, which is all solid cast iron. This really makes a huge difference, and it prevents dishes from scorching that have to simmer for a long, long time, especially if they've got things in them that will be prone to scorching, like proteins and like powders can get stuck to the bottom. So make sure you use one of these when you're cooking chili, and it will make a huge difference, I promise you. Alright, so I've got the chili simmering. I've actually got it cooking covered for a little bit, and I took the lid off just now, and it's going to come to a boil fairly soon. In my case, I've been cooking this a little more slowly than I normally would because it's hot here right now, and like you know, I have MS, and heat is my worst enemy. So I've been drinking water, I've been drinking Powerade, and I've been letting this boil slowly as I pace myself, just like I would at a chili cook-off, and it really makes a huge difference as the day goes on. So make sure that no matter what you do, you stay refreshed, and you stay hydrated, and you stay as cool as you can. So I got the chili up to a boil, and I have put the diffuser underneath it, and you can see it brought it back down to a simmer. I do have the burner on low right now, but when I put the lid back on, it's going to bring it right back up to a boil. Now, I promised to tell you a little bit more about the cooking stocks that I use. I've got spices back there too, and I've got a spice grinder, so let's begin. I have 2 fat-free stocks here, and while I try to get all unsalted, I have a unsalted and a low sodium version of the different stocks that I use. For TMI chili, I use the chicken stock and the beef stock, the entire thing. Chicken stock is really, really good because it has a very neutral flavor. It can go in any type of dish that has any type of protein, and it won't really add any flavor that detracts from it. It'll actually enhance the flavor of whatever you're cooking. In my competition chili, I don't use chicken stock, I actually use vegetable stock and a smaller amount of beef stock. But because we're doing a huge batch here, we're actually using both of these containers. We're using all of them in the stock so that we have a really good base. Ingredients. Okay, so we have some spices here. I've got some chipotle pepper on the left there. I've got a chili powder that I made out of puya and guajillo chilies, and other ingredients that make chili powder, and that's chili powder with an I, chili powder. The chipotle pepper is actually a chile pepper that's just ground. Then I have oregano and cumin seed, California garlic, toasted onion, and Pendry's San Antonio red chili powder, which I like for general purposes. There's a little bit of it in my competition chili, but I'm not going to tell you anything more about that particular recipe. But I'm going to be using it here as our primary chili powder. Now here's my spice grinder. Okay, you can see there that my spices are all ground or powdered, but when it really comes down to it, they need to be talc fine, like talc powder that you would buy in a store actually, because you want that flavor to permeate the meat as well as you can, and you want it to dissolve as much as possible in the sauce so that you have that flavor everywhere that you go. And in this particular chili, because it's TMI, it's not just the meat that we're going to be permeating with flavor, we're going to permeate the other ingredients too. We've got other ingredients that make this TMI chili and that make it People's Choice chili, and I'll show you those in a little bit. We're going to grind stuff, and then we'll add stuff to the pot. Okay, so we've got stuff in the spice grinder. We've created what we call our first dump. What a dump is in the chili world is a combination of spices that are put together to add to your chili, and they're usually a little bit different, at least in my chili and in a number of other people's chili too, so that you build layers of flavor with different dumps as you cook your chili over time. In this case, I've got the San Antonio red, the chipotle, the puya y guajillo, the toasted onion, the California garlic, and I've ground it really, really, really fine. I'm going to grind it one more time, and I'll show you what that looks like. I love this spice grinder. One of my chili mentors actually recommended this grinder to me, and there's a slider on the bottom that I've set to number 8, which matches the measure on the inside of the metal container in there, and since those match, it is actually a grinder that runs for a certain period of time. The knob I actually have set to espresso because I want a really, really fine grind. So what's going to happen when we turn this on, it's going to run for a little bit of time, and then it's going to go ahead and kick off, and here we go. And you can see that it stops on its own afterwards. It's because of, again, I set it to a particular setting, the slider setting and the espresso setting, and I've got a really nice talcum powder fine chili grind. Now I'm going to let it sit there so that when I pop it open, I don't mace myself with it. It needs to settle, and then we'll go ahead and dump that into the chili as the first round of spices that we add. I really wish you had smell-o-vision. The aroma of this dump is just absolutely wonderful. So let's take the lid off the pot, and we'll go ahead and dump this in and stir it in, and it is just going to add so much flavor, and you'll see it adds some really good color to the chili. Notice it's kind of pink, kind of orange. That's okay because we want our chili to be bright red. It's going to darken because you can see that we've got a darker color of from the broth, but when we add this in, watch the color change that happens. Okay, here we go. The chili knows that it's spicy powder. It bubbled up when I added it in. but look at the color it's got already. I mean, that's a really nice red, and it's only going to get more concentrated as far as red is concerned. And I'll get a better exposed shot because my camera's being a little weird, but you can see that the remnants on the side as we're stirring around are really, really fine. It's not big chunks like you'll get if you hadn't ground it. There's a good shot of the red. That's how red it is. It's not quite as red as the Dutch oven, but it's really a nice color. We're going to let it bubble for a while, and we'll add more volume to it as we add more ingredients. It's going to look really good, and it's going to taste phenomenal. So we're going to go ahead and take the lid off here and take a look at what our chili is. I've prepared another dump. This is dump number 2, and it has different stuff in it than the first one. Kind of mixed up things a little bit here. You're not going to know what's in it, but you know the type of things I'm putting in it, and you'll get to see this dump go in. A lighter colored dump, isn't it? In fact, it's almost white. I'm sure you can guess some of the things that are in there. We're going to go ahead and shake it up a little bit and dump it into the pot, and that'll add even more layer of flavor than we had before. Oh, look at that boil. That looks really, really good. It's glubbing, it's bubbling, and it's percolating, which is kind of what stewing is. You're kind of percolating all of your seasonings into your cooking, and we'll go ahead and stir that around. No explosive reactions like before, but we were adding a different dump at that point. Now at this point, the chili is flavorful, but it doesn't quite taste like chili yet, and there are a few things we have to add before it'll really start to taste like chili. But look at that color. Now, I'm going to show you my chili kit. I've got some stuff that I've used. I've taken it out of my chili kit, and I've already used it. You've seen it. What we're going after is this here. This is the white chili powder. And yes, it's a coarse grind. Sometimes I'll grind this finer, but in this case I'm going to use the coarse grind of this white chili powder. And let me get the lid off of that jar. And while we're taking that lid off, just look how red that is. Now let's add some of this white chili powder. Look like a lot? Trust me, it's not. Because it's a big pot of chili, and it's only gonna add a little bit of flavor, but if you didn't add it, you'd notice it. So again, we're gonna have 6 quarts of chili by the time we're done, and that white chili powder, and no, I won't tell you exactly what it is, but that white chili powder is really gonna help bring out those extra flavors, and when we get to our next dump, it's going to bring those out even more. A note about oregano. There are different schools of thought, depending on where you learned about chili, that talk about whether or not you should have oregano in your chili. While this isn't competition chili, this is my homemade chili, and I try to be a little bit more traditional when it comes to certain aspects of my chili cooking. My TMI chili is not traditional by any means, but one of the traditional elements I keep is this oregano, and a lot of Texas chili cooks, some really devout ones at that, will actually have you use oregano, whereas other chili cooks, especially competition chili cooks, a lot of people don't use oregano because of the way that competition chili has evolved. I'm not making competition chili, so I don't care today. We're going to go ahead and use some oregano, and I do grind it a little finer, and actually I'll tell you what, it's actually ground pretty fine. I've used some oregano already, and look at this. It doesn't discolor it, it doesn't detract from the flavor at all, it doesn't make it taste powdery. Not at all. And I've got a nice, bright red chili, and that oregano has not affected the fact that I've got that really bright looking sauce, and it really is good. And I like the flavor of oregano. I think it just is a good thing. But for now, we're going to let this stew, and I'll be back in just a little bit to talk about another key chili ingredient. So, see you in a second. So, this is People's Choice chili, and I've got all kinds of weird ingredients. I've got some ingredients I've already put in. The white corn, which I drained. I dumped in 2 cans of it, and I dumped in 2 cans of drained diced tomatoes. Here I've got some beans. We're going to go ahead and add 2 cans drained and 1 can drained of beans. We're going to use black beans and kidney beans, and another dump. I've ground it, and it's ready to go. I just haven't added it. And then there's one other special ingredient that I haven't added to this yet, and that is cumin. Every chili recipe that I have come across, from the really traditional stuff from the days of Frank X. Tolbert and before, all the way up to H. Allen Smith, all the way up to now in competition chili, cumin is a common ingredient. No matter what chile powders you add, then that's ground whole chiles, or what chili powder, and that's chili with an I, that you add, you've got to have some cumin because it is a quintessential flavor that your chili just won't taste like chili without. I've ground this really, 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 really fine, and it's going to go in near the end of my cooking. There you can see I've got the corn and I've got the tomatoes. We're going to go ahead and let that cook for 10 minutes and then put in the beans and then the dump and then the cumin, stir it up and let it stew. So you see I've added the grains, the vegetables. Well, actually tomatoes are a fruit, so we'll call them fruits, legumes, and grains. We've got black beans, red beans, we've got corn, and we've got tomatoes. I like white corn. I think it really adds a good bite to the chili as far as texture goes. And it is not too overly sweet in the corn flavor, and it absorbs a lot of the spices that I put into the chili. And this is the People's Choice chili I make. I have about 3, maybe a little more, 3 or 4 gallons to give away by the time that we're done, because I've made this recipe over and over and over, and I've frozen it for my trip to the Missouri State in Clarksville, which is just outside of St. Louis. I have one more dump to add, and you can see it's really fine. And after I dump this, I'm going to add cumin to taste. And I'm not going to show you how much I put in because it's to taste, and you'll get a feel for it. And then we'll let it cook for about 20, maybe 30 minutes. See if it needs anything else. Maybe more white chili powder or cumin or anything else. And we'll go from there. I'll also show you a little bit more about my spice grinder here in just a moment. I really love this grinder. You can see how fine of a grind it produces there. And I can't tout it enough. Now this is the final chili. Magic of television, we're done. This is everything. I've got a great broth. I've got a great balance between the meat, between the white corn, the black beans, the red beans, and the tomatoes. Now I am just really happy with this. I've been tasting it and I just love it. So again, I told you how much I like this spice grinder. This spice grinder is really portable. You see that little kind of disc on the bottom of the spice grinder there? I can't do this while I'm on camera, but I will. Let me wind it up. But you'll see at the end here that wheel actually, when you spin it, it retracts the cord back into the spice grinder, and then you twist the bottom, and the cord retracts all the way in, just like that, and it makes it really portable. Another thing I like about this spice grinder is that the metal container comes off, so when I go to wash this, I just have to wipe down the plastic and twist the metal container, and it'll pop right off. And I can get all that dust out of there, all of that chili powder and chili dump mixings. This gives you a good chance to see the measurings too. But I take it off and I wash it, and that's it. It's ready. I'm really proud of the chili, and I am happy. The flame is off. The stove is off in all respects. The oven, all burners, and the chili is done. I'll give you the links to the places that I source from, and maybe you'll find some stuff there that you like. And thanks for bearing with me. I hope you enjoy this video. Remember, if you want to help with donations to the fundraising campaign, go to www.facebook.com/thechiligames and click on the fundraising link at the top. And I hope you go out there and experiment on your own.